She thought she was retrieving a secret weapon against her ex-husband, but instead, she just planted a bomb, and now the real game is about to begin. The crisp autumn air did little to cool the fire raging in my stomach. I clutched the eviction notice, the cheap recycled paper feeling like sandpaper against my sweaty palm. It was addressed to occupant, but we both knew who the intended target was. Brenda, my ex-husband Mark's shiny, terrifyingly perfect new wife. We'd been divorced for 3 years, but it felt like Brenda had been waiting in the wings since the moment Mark first proposed. She'd been patient, gliding through life as the supportive second wife, always smiling, always baking organic gluten-free muffins for neighborhood potlucks. But beneath the veneer of artisanal perfection, Brenda was a shark, and the house I was currently living in, the house I'd poured my life savings and countless hours into renovating with Mark, was her primary feeding ground. The agreement we struck after the divorce was deliberately vague about the property. Mark got the house. I got a significant financial settlement, enough to buy a decent condo somewhere else. The catch? I was allowed to stay in the guest suite rent-free until the house sold. That clause was my lifeline, the one tiny shard of control I'd managed to cling to when Mark, in his final act of passive-aggressive dominance, insisted on keeping the house on the market indefinitely, dragging out the process just to keep me tethered to him. But Brenda had other plans. I stomped into the living room, kicking off my shoes. The eviction notice sat stark white against the dark mahogany coffee table. It wasn't a formal legal document yet, just a strongly worded letter from her attorney, demanding I vacate within 30 days. 30 days to find a new place, pack a lifetime of memories, and uproot myself from the only place that felt remotely like home since the divorce. 30 days, huh? I muttered, grabbing my phone. I dialed the number for Mr. Henderson, my lawyer. He was old school, smelled faintly of pipe tobacco, and had the weary, knowing eyes of a man who'd seen every flavor of marital sabotage imaginable. He picked up on the second ring. Eleanor, to what do I owe the pleasure? I quickly summarized the situation, my voice tight with controlled fury. Brenda's lawyer sent a letter, Arthur. They're trying to force the sale or get me out. They're claiming I'm interfering with showings, citing noise complaints, the usual nonsense. There was a long silence on the line, punctuated only by the sound of Arthur clearing his throat. I saw the preliminary filing attached to the notice, Eleanor. It's aggressive but not entirely baseless. They're leaning heavily on the material breach of the residency clause. Frankly, Brenda is proving to be more tenacious than I anticipated. Tenacious? Arthur, she's trying to throw me onto the street 2 months before Christmas. What about the agreement? Mark signed it. Agreements are only as strong as the willingness of the parties to adhere to them, my dear. Brenda has convinced Mark that your continued presence is devaluing the property and, frankly, is causing emotional distress to his new wife. My blood pressure spiked. Emotional distress. She's the one sending thinly veiled threats. I understand your frustration, but we need leverage. I've already sent a response reminding them that breaking the clause without due process opens them up to significant penalties outlined in the divorce decree. I think they'll back down once they see we're not going to roll over. You think? Arthur, I need certainty. I can't afford to move right now, not if the settlement money is tied up waiting for this house sale. Relax, Eleanor. I've been preparing for this escalation since the ink dried on the decree. I knew Brenda was ambitious. I've had contingency plans in place for months. Send me a copy of that notice immediately. And Eleanor, while you're waiting for my official strategy outline, I need you to do one thing for me. A small favor. It might just be the key to keeping you right where you are. I leaned against the kitchen counter, the cool granite a momentary comfort. Name it. Go into the spare bedroom, the one Mark used as his home office before the divorce. Check the top drawer of the old filing cabinet, the heavy metal one. There should be a thick manila envelope tucked behind some dusty tax returns. Bring that envelope to my office first thing tomorrow morning. Do not open it. Do not look inside. Just bring it to me. My heart hammered against my ribs. Why did he need a random envelope from an old filing cabinet? Mark had packed up everything important years ago. The guest suite was supposed to be untouched, a neutral zone. "Arthur, what is in that envelope?" I asked, suddenly hesitant. His voice dropped, becoming gravely serious. "Eleanor, trust me on this. It relates directly to the equity of this house, but not in the way you think. It's insurance. I wouldn't ask you to touch it if it wasn't absolutely necessary. Be careful opening the drawer. That old lock sticks. Just get the envelope and meet me at 9 a.m. sharp." I hung up the phone, my mind racing. The spare room, the dusty filing cabinet. Insurance? What kind of insurance did a divorce settlement need months later? I walked down the hallway, the heavy oak door of the guest suite, my current prison refuge, looming before me. I hesitated, glancing back toward the living room where the eviction notice lay. I pushed open the spare room door. The air was stale, thick with the scent of old paper and disuse. The metal cabinet stood in the corner, looking stubbornly locked down. I tugged at the top drawer. It groaned in protest, scraping loudly as it slid open an inch, then catching hard. I pulled again, harder this time, ignoring the sharp spike of pain in my shoulder, until with a final violent shudder, the drawer wrenched open enough for me to peer inside. And there it was, a thick, aged manila envelope tucked behind a stack of 2018 mortgage statements. As I reached for it, my fingers brushing the brittle paper, I heard a sound from downstairs that made my blood freeze instantly, the unmistakable sound of the front door unlocking. Brenda was home early. The sound of the deadbolt clicking back echoed up the stairwell with the heavy finality of a prison gate slamming shut. Brenda was meticulous about locking up. If the door was unlocked, it meant she had just unlocked it. And she never came home early. Her schedule was rigid, optimized for maximum social impact, usually involving Pilates or tedious charity luncheons until at least 4 p.m. It was barely 2:30. My body went rigid. I was still hunched over the filing cabinet, one hand gripping the edge of the drawer, the other hovering inches from the manila envelope Arthur had commanded me to retrieve. If she found me back here, rooting through Mark's forgotten office, the eviction notice would look like a polite suggestion compared to the legal war she would immediately unleash. I yanked the drawer shut with a muffled thud, or what I hoped was muffled. The resulting metallic screech, however, sounded deafening in the sudden silence of the house. I froze, every nerve ending screaming. Downstairs, I heard the distinct sharp click of high heels on the polished hardwood floor of the foyer. Brenda never walked. She clicked. "Hello?" Her voice was too bright, too cheerful, cutting through the quiet. It carried perfectly up the open staircase, laced with an unmistakable edge of synthetic concern. "Is anyone home? I thought I heard a strange noise. Eleanor? Are you perhaps struggling with the vacuum cleaner again?" Struggling with the vacuum cleaner. That was her designated narrative for any unusual activity in the guest wing. She was testing the waters, waiting to see if I would retreat into my designated zone, or worse, admit I was back in Mark's old office space. I backed away from the cabinet, my eyes darting around the room. There was no back door, no secondary exit from this second-floor wing, besides the main staircase. I had perhaps 30 seconds before she decided to investigate the vacuum cleaner noise more closely. The manila envelope was still in the drawer. If I left without it, Arthur would be furious, and I'd lose my leverage. If I stayed to retrieve it, I'd be caught red-handed in a room I wasn't supposed to be in, potentially invalidating my entire claim to quiet residency. "It's fine, Brenda," I called out, pitching my voice higher than I intended. I tried to sound casual, as if I were polishing silver, not committing a potential breach of contract. "Just doing a little tidying. I thought I heard the mail carrier. Sorry if I made a racket." The clicking stopped. Silence descended again, heavier this time, fraught with suspicion. Brenda didn't buy false cheer. "Tidying," she called back, her voice now directly beneath the landing. "In Mark's old office? That's very thoughtful of you, Eleanor. But remember, we need to keep the general presentation of the house as is for showings. Perhaps save the deep cleaning for when you've found your new place." She was implying I was cleaning for a showing, establishing her narrative that I was simply overstaying my welcome and making myself inconvenient. I needed that envelope. Arthur had said it was insurance. I couldn't just leave it. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, I lunged back toward the cabinet. I pulled the drawer open again, ignoring the screech, plunging my hand deep inside, past the tax receipts, past the old stationery until my fingers closed around the thick, textured paper of the manila envelope. I snatched it, stuffing it instantly inside the pocket of my oversized cardigan, smoothing the fabric down. I turned just as the first sound of her ascending the stairs reached me. A rhythmic, escalating click-clack, click-clack. She was coming up, not politely checking the front hall, but actively climbing toward the source of the noise. There was a small, dusty window in the office, overlooking the side yard and the overgrown privet hedge that bordered the neighbor's property. It was certainly too high to jump safely, but maybe it was the only way out. I scrambled toward the window, fumbling with the old brass latch. It was painted shut, fused by years of humidity and neglect. I shoved against the frame, ignoring the muffled sound of Brenda's steady ascent, which was now alarmingly close. I could almost hear her controlled breathing. The latch finally gave way with a dry crack. Cold air rushed in. I shoved the window up, the rusty hinges protesting violently. "Eleanor, what on earth are you doing up there?" Brenda's voice was sharp, cutting through the air, no longer masked by false politeness. She was at the top of the stairs, feet away from the office door. I didn't answer. I gripped the windowsill, the rough stucco biting into my palms. The drop was at least 15 feet onto uneven flagstones. It was a risk, but the alternative was facing Brenda while clutching evidence Arthur needed, evidence she clearly didn't know existed. I swung one leg over the sill, bracing myself for the impact, the cold reality of the fall. Suddenly, the office door handle began to turn, slowly, deliberately, from the outside. Brenda wasn't going to knock this time. She was entering. I had maybe 3 seconds before she laid eyes on me halfway out the window, clutching a secret envelope. I pushed off the sill, tucking my chin, aiming for the softest patch of earth beneath the hedge, letting gravity take over, when I heard a new sound, a sharp, authoritative rap, rap, rap coming not from inside the house, but directly from the front door downstairs. Someone else was here, someone insistent. And Brenda was trapped between the stairs and the front door, just as I was dropping out of the window. Before I could even fully commit to the jump, I heard Brenda's frustrated shriek echo through the hallway, clearly aimed at the unexpected visitor. "Who dares interrupt me right now?" The sound of Brenda's shriek was immediately followed by a deep, resonant voice booming up from downstairs, a voice that sent a completely different kind of chill down my spine, one that had nothing to do with eviction notices and everything to do with legal consequence. "This is a matter of subpoena, Mrs. Hawthorne. Open this door immediately. I am Officer Reynolds, Metropolitan Records Division." Officer Reynolds. Subpoena. My heart leaped into my throat, momentarily eclipsing the fear of the 15-foot drop. Arthur hadn't mentioned a process server or a police visit. This wasn't just a divorce spat anymore. This was becoming a federal situation. I was still balanced precariously on the window ledge, one foot dangling in the open air. I could hear Brenda scrambling, presumably having abandoned her confrontation with me to deal with the official visitor. The sound of her heels changed from an angry clicking to a panicked tap dancing as she rushed down the stairs toward the front entrance. This was my chance. With the envelope burning a hole in my pocket, I swung my other leg out, letting go entirely. I hit the ground hard, not gracefully but survivably. The damp earth and thorny shrubs cushioned the worst of the fall, but the impact still sent a jolt of blinding pain up my left ankle. I hissed, biting back a cry, knowing that any noise would draw immediate attention, especially with the drama unfolding at the front door. I pulled myself forward, crab-crawling through the overgrown hedge, ignoring the thorns ripping at my clothes. I needed distance, concealment. The neighbor's yard was dark and shadowed. I scrambled behind a massive, moss-covered oak tree just as Brenda's sharp, controlled voice, now strained, filtered through the house walls. "I'm afraid you have the wrong address, officer. My husband is currently unavailable. Is there something I can assist you with?" "Mrs. Hawthorne." Officer Reynolds' voice was firm, lacking any of Brenda's synthetic deference. We are here concerning the property located at this address, specifically relating to financial disclosure documents pertaining to Mark Hawthorne and the dissolution of his previous marriage to Eleanor Vance. Financial disclosure. That sounded far more serious than a simple eviction threat. I clutched the manila envelope tighter. Was this what Arthur meant by insurance? Had he preemptively triggered some official audit or investigation related to the settlement funds? I risked a glance back at the house. The office window stood open, a dark square against the afternoon gloom. The front door was still closed, but the tension radiating from the structure felt palpable. Brenda hesitated. I could practically hear her calculating the risk of antagonizing a federal officer versus letting them in. "Look, I'm sure this is a misunderstanding," Brenda finally managed, her voice losing its edge, taking on a pleading quality. "If you could just leave your paperwork with me, I'll ensure Mark gets it immediately." "Negative, Mrs. Hawthorne. We require immediate verification of specific records. We have reason to believe certain documentation relevant to the Vance divorce was intentionally withheld or obscured. We need access to the home office and all associated financial records from 2020 onwards." The home office? My old office. The one I was just frantically clearing out for Arthur. Brenda let out a strangled sound. "The home office is currently undergoing fumigation, officer. It's sealed." A lie. Transparent and weak. I knew Brenda wouldn't allow anything in the house she couldn't personally vet, least of all city officials poking around Mark's messy paperwork. "Fumigation is scheduled for next Tuesday, according to city records, Mrs. Hawthorne. We have a warrant allowing supervised entry to inspect the premises for relevant documents. We will be entering now." There was a sudden loud scuffle downstairs, followed by a heavy, authoritative thump. The front door had been breached. Brenda had clearly tried to physically block them, and they had overpowered her. I finally managed to press my weight against my throbbing ankle and limp forward, adrenaline overriding the pain. I had to get the envelope to Arthur before the police tore the house apart, looking for documents that Brenda probably thought were hidden in a safety deposit box. I rounded the corner of the yard and started hobbling toward the street, trying to remain unseen, when my phone vibrated violently in my pocket. It was Arthur Henderson. I fumbled for it, pressing the answer button as I kept moving. Thank God. I got the envelope. I'm on the street, but the police are here. They have a warrant for Mark's office. They're looking for financial documents from the divorce. Arthur's voice was rushed, strained. "Eleanor, listen to me very carefully. You can't bring the envelope here, not now. The police presence downstairs is too much. They'll intercept you. And that envelope, it's not a police matter, it's a countermeasure." "Countermeasure for what? What's in here, Arthur?" I whispered fiercely, peering back toward the house, where I could now see the official-looking sedan parked conspicuously at the curb. It was a fail-safe, Eleanor. If Mark ever tried to hide assets, or if Brenda discovered something about his other business dealings, that envelope contains the evidence necessary to nullify any transaction related to this property over the last 5 years. It's leverage against Mark, not just Brenda. Leverage against Mark? What other business dealings? He leveraged the house equity against a private loan he took out 2 years ago. A very dangerous loan, Eleanor. The lender is ag-aggressive. If the house sale falls through, or if Mark defaults, they come after the collateral, which includes your settlement payout until the lien is cleared. The envelope contains the original promissory note, signed by Mark, detailing the terms. If the police are looking for financial disclosures, they might find the lien paperwork Brenda is trying to hide. If they find that lien, the lender gets called in immediately, and they will seize the property before any eviction appeal can be processed. My breath hitched. Seizure, not eviction. This was far worse. "So what do I do with this note?" I pleaded. Arthur took a sharp, rattling breath. "You need to get it somewhere safe, somewhere only you have access to. The only safe place left is the one place Brenda and Mark will never look, because they think you're desperate and defeated." "Where, Arthur? Where is it?" "Your condo, Eleanor. Go there now. Meet me there tomorrow morning, not the office. But listen, the note is only good if it's authentic. The paper itself is keyed to a time-sensitive digital signature embedded in the ink. If the ink is exposed to anything unnatural, it degrades, and the signature is invalidated. What kind of unnatural exposure? I demanded, reaching the end of the block. Humidity, extreme temperature shifts, or direct focused UV light. Eleanor, you need to seal that envelope immediately and keep it away from sunlight. Now hurry, because Brenda just walked out onto the porch, looking utterly defeated, and she's staring directly at the front of the house, where the officer just placed a large, official-looking lockbox on the porch railing. I stopped dead in my tracks. A lockbox on the porch. Arthur, what is in the lockbox? I don't know, he whispered, his composure finally breaking. But the officer just tapped it twice, and Brenda is staring at it like it contains the antidote to her existence. Get to your condo, Eleanor, and don't let that envelope out of your sight. I hung up, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the incriminating paper in my pocket. I started jogging toward my own apartment complex 2 blocks away, glancing over my shoulder. Brenda was still standing on the porch, staring at the new lockbox, her perfect facade completely shattered. And then, to my horror, I saw Officer Reynolds emerge from the house, not walking toward his car, but walking directly toward the lockbox Brenda was guarding, pulling a small, specialized device from his coat pocket. He wasn't interested in the house's contents anymore. He was interested in whatever he had just delivered. As he approached the box, he didn't look at Brenda. He looked past her, directly at the oak tree I'd just hidden behind. And in his hand, he held a handheld device that was blinking with a distinct, focused blue light. The focused blue light emanating from the device in Officer Reynolds' hand hit the porch railing where the lockbox sat, and a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer seemed to rise from the metal. My stomach plummeted. He wasn't just delivering the box, he was scanning it, or perhaps activating it remotely. And the beam of light, whether intended for the box or not, was currently sweeping directly over the area where I had just been concealed behind the oak tree. If that specialized UV light could degrade the ink in Arthur's crucial promissory note, then Brenda and Mark, or whoever was truly running this game, had access to technology far beyond standard police procedure. This wasn't just about hiding assets. This was about destroying specific pieces of evidence before they could even be cataloged. I forced my throbbing ankle into a faster pace, adrenaline turning the pain into a dull throb. I had to get the envelope into my condo, a place Brenda hadn't visited in months and certainly hadn't thought to search, and seal it in the one place impervious to light, the deep, dark recesses of my antique, unlit jewelry safe. As I turned the corner onto my street, a wave of relief washed over me. My building was a squat, unglamorous brick structure, the antithesis of the sprawling modernism Mark and Brenda preferred. It was safe. I fumbled with my keys at the main entrance, my hands shaking so badly I dropped them twice. Finally, the lock clicked, and I burst into the quiet lobby, ignoring the mild glance from Mrs. Petrov, who was tending her philodendrons by the mailboxes. I didn't even bother taking the elevator. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my bad ankle screaming a protest with every step, until I reached my 3rd-floor unit. Inside, I slammed the door, threw the deadbolt, and leaned against it, gulping down air. The manila envelope felt dangerously hot in my cardigan pocket. I ripped it out, my movements clumsy with panic. I didn't dare look at the contents, just shoved it deep into the velvet-lined compartment of the small, heavy safe hidden behind a sliding panel in my bedroom closet. I spun the dial. 12/28/05, the anniversary of my first date with Mark, the only date Brenda wouldn't know, and heard the satisfying thunk as the mechanism engaged. Safe. For now. I staggered back into the living room, collapsing onto the sofa, trying to process the rapid descent into chaos. Police, warrants, hidden liens, and specialized UV scanners. This was far bigger than a simple domestic dispute over real estate. My phone immediately buzzed again. It was Arthur. Eleanor, status update now. I'm secure. The envelope is locked away in my safe. I saw the officer downstairs. Arthur. He had some kind of device, a blue light, pointed at the porch. Brenda looked terrified of it. A heavy silence crackled over the line. When Arthur spoke again, his voice was cold, devoid of its usual gentle weariness. The lockbox is not for the police, Eleanor. It's for you. I recognized the make. That is a Faraday case data recovery unit, often used by private investigators to retrieve information wirelessly from compromised devices. So, what was the officer doing? Breaking into Mark's house to plant something or retrieve something? Neither. He was making sure your digital footprint was clean before he activated the final phase. Eleanor, the police warrant was a diversion. It was meant to flush out Brenda, put pressure on the property, and draw attention away from the real action. "Which is?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "That envelope you just secured? It contained the physical evidence that proves Mark used the house equity to cover massive losses from his cryptocurrency investments 2 years ago. Investments he assured you were safe and which he claimed were liquidated ethically during the divorce settlement. But the lien you mentioned, the lien was fake, Eleanor, a placeholder. The real danger was a hidden clause in the divorce papers stating that if Mark ever defaulted on any personal debt accrued before the divorce, the lender could claim full equity, overriding your settlement entirely. Brenda was trying to evict you to force a quick sale and pay off that debt before the real creditor, the one Reynolds works for, could step in. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Brenda wasn't trying to get me out so she could move in. She was trying to get me out so she could sell the house to a shadowy entity before the actual creditors swooped in and took everything, including the money I thought was safely paid to me. So, the police, Officer Reynolds, he works for the real creditor? Yes, and he just left a traceable, wirelessly activated lockbox on the porch as bait. If you had gone to the police station or even called them back, they would have traced your communication, confirmed you had the evidence, and then the lockbox would have sent a counter signal, a spike of heat or radiation, designed to destroy the embedded signature in that note before you could present it. I stared at my phone, suddenly terrified of Arthur himself, the man who had set up a contingency plan relying on a highly advanced, potentially destructive, government-grade device. "Arthur," I said slowly, "if you set up this contingency and you knew about the UV light risk, why did you send me to the one place where Officer Reynolds was actively scanning with that device? Why risk the note?" A long, terrifying pause stretched between us. "Because, Eleanor," Arthur finally admitted, his voice barely a rasp, "I didn't send you to retrieve a note. I sent you to retrieve the trigger for the system. That envelope wasn't filled with paperwork. It was filled with micro-switches linked to a timed, inert, explosive charge. I needed you to put it in the safe, a confined, non-conductive space. Before the police operation concluded, Officer Reynolds wasn't scanning the lockbox to destroy your evidence. He was scanning it to confirm the timing of the detonation." My hands flew to the safe where the envelope now rested. "Detonation? Arthur, what did you tell me to secure?" "That envelope, Eleanor," Arthur said, his voice chillingly calm, "is a timed device. It's set to go off precisely 30 minutes after it's moved from the filing cabinet. It's designed to erase Mark's office completely, incinerating all the remaining files Brenda didn't clear out. You were supposed to put it in the safe to contain the blast radius. But Eleanor, the countdown started when you touched it. You've got less than 5 minutes left. Get out of the building, now." The word explosive detonated in my mind with more force than any physical blast could muster. 5 minutes. I stared wildly at the innocuous, heavy safe in my closet, the keeper of my supposed leverage, now the epicenter of my immediate peril. Arthur hadn't warned me about evidence. He had weaponized me. "Arthur, why didn't you tell me it was a bomb?" I shrieked, already tearing the safe door open, reaching in with desperate, clumsy fingers. "Because you wouldn't have complied, Eleanor. You would have panicked and called the authorities. This was the only way to ensure Mark's entire financial house of cards collapsed before Brenda could salvage it. It's done now. The charge is armed. You have to get out." I yanked the envelope free. The paper felt warm, vibrating faintly against my skin. I didn't have time to look for a disposal unit or call 911. Arthur's elaborate game meant the authorities were likely compromised or working against me. The only certainty was the timer ticking down inside my hand. I bolted out of the bedroom, my ankle protesting with every stride. I slammed the front door open, ignoring the rising sound of distant sirens, perhaps responding to the earlier disturbance or maybe alerted by Arthur's elaborate signal. I couldn't go back to the street. The blue light device was down there. I had to go up. The rooftop access. It was a long shot, but a direct path away from civilian casualties. I found the access door to the roof landing near the main stairwell, a heavy, fire-rated slab of metal that always stuck. I threw my shoulder against it, once, twice. On the third desperate heave, the latch groaned and gave way. I tumbled onto the flat, tarred roof surface just as the phone in my hand went dead. Arthur cutting off communication, the final phase initiated. I scrambled to my feet, the open envelope still clutched tight. The building below was 4 stories tall. I was directly above the lobby, the place where Mrs. Petrov was tending her plants. The blast radius for a contained charge like this would be severe, localized but devastating to the structure around it. I looked around the desolate rooftop. Nothing. No way to safely dispose of a ticking bomb designed to destroy evidence. Then I saw it. The massive, obsolete HVAC unit at the far end of the roof, covered in rust and decades of pigeon droppings. It was a hollow metal shell, large enough to swallow me whole, and it was weighted down, bolted securely to the roof's concrete base. My lungs burned. I ran, half limping, half staggering toward the unit. 3 minutes remaining. I reached the unit, the metal cold beneath my fingertips. I forced the access panel open. It groaned like a dying animal, and shoved the envelope deep inside the rusted cavity, wedging it against a tangle of defunct wiring. It settled with a soft thud. I slammed the panel shut, locking the rusted latch with trembling fingers, and then stumbled backward, putting as much distance between myself and the metal box as physics would allow. I pressed myself flat against the low parapet wall, shielded partially by a ventilation pipe. The world seemed to hold its breath. The sirens were getting louder, closer. I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable sound. Tick, tick, tick. Then silence. No explosion, no shriek of tearing metal, nothing. I waited a full minute and heart pounding a desperate rhythm against the concrete, expecting the delayed fuse, the secondary charge, anything. Slowly, tentatively, I pushed myself up. The HVAC unit sat there, inert, silent, looking exactly as it had for the last 20 years. Had Arthur miscalculated? Had the charge failed? I crept back toward the unit, peering over the edge of the massive metal box, ready to snatch the evidence out if it hadn't detonated. As I leaned in, I noticed something resting on the very edge of the access panel. A small folded piece of pristine white paper. It hadn't been there before. It was too crisp, too clean to have blown up from inside the unit. My hand trembled violently as I reached for it. It was folded with impossible precision, the corners razor sharp. It was not the aged manila. I unfolded the paper. It wasn't a note from Arthur. It was a single sheet of legal paper, bearing an official-looking seal in crisp black typeface. It read, "Notice of reclamation and seizure to Eleanor Vance. Mi Ashari. Unsecured assets and concealment of evidence pertaining to Mark Hawthorne's liabilities. Pursuant to Warrant 77B, executed today, October 27th. The contained item placed on the premises by Agent Reynolds was not an explosive device, but a tracking beacon designed to lead us to the primary unsecured asset. We confirm that the object you retrieved and placed inside the HVAC housing is now fully located and secured by this agency. The envelope you retrieved from the office contained only inert ballast. Sand, Eleanor. Your lawyer's fail-safe was a decoy. Please report to the ground floor lobby immediately for processing. You are being detained in connection with the destruction of potential evidence and obstruction of federal inquiry." I stared at the paper, the sirens now screeching directly outside the building entrance below. Arthur hadn't saved me. He had used me as a sophisticated retrieval system to place his evidence exactly where the real authorities could find it, making me the primary suspect for planting it. As I crumpled the paper in my fist, the access panel on the HVAC unit, the one I had just shut, snapped open on its own with a loud metallic crack, revealing the dull, inert sand inside. and resting on top of the sand, glowing faintly even in the daylight, was a small black USB drive, the true prize, now perfectly positioned for whoever was standing on the roof just behind me to easily retrieve. I spun around, knowing I was trapped, only to see Officer Reynolds standing there, his face expressionless, the blue light device now aimed squarely at my eyes. Behind him, the door to the roof access was swinging shut, sealing me in.